Hello, Shannon. This is Alka from Global Women Power, and this is a 501c involved in creating a women's network. As the name says, it's a women power. So my whole idea about this network is to have an equality of power, people with more power with people with less power so that it can flow. So in the same series, we started this called Meet Our Sheroes, and in which, we interview women of excellence, those who have made it in spite of all the odds
Mm-hmm.
they were presented. And now they are in a position where they command power, and then they are contributing in their own sweet way. So the way we run it is that, we just ask you where you are as of now and from where you started, and then
Mm-hmm.
where you are going.
Oh, that's interesting.
So please, over to you. Introduce yourself and then tell to our audience, what is your current position or
Oh,
occupation?
okay. So my name is Shannen Enos Pousada. My business corporation's name is Enos CPR Services. I am an emergency room nurse. I'm about to retire. I still currently work, but I work on call because the business has grown so much. And so I hit 30 years this past December. And I
Wow.
feel very proud of that. I could keep going. It's just been hard to be able to contribute at the hospital when I'm traveling all the time. And I feel bad when I have to cancel. And so I'm going to work for a few days next week, but that's probably it for the whole month. So I decided to retire. I just haven't picked the month yet.
Mhm.
So I began this business, which, by the way, is a safety-based business. So what I essentially do the majority of the time is teach people how to save lives, which goes right along with what I do for my job. And it just kind of fell in my lap one day when someone upset me about something and I complained. I'm a good complainer. And it turned into an opportunity where I realized that there was not a representation in this type of industry. And I decided to just go out and do it, not knowing how fast it would grow
Mhm.
and how many different types of industry. I was a nurse, so I only knew about healthcare systems. I didn't know about teachers or police officers or childcare providers or airline attendants. There are just endless different industries that require training, and there's a lot of industry that does not. Like your nail salon does not require training. A tattoo salon does kind of a little require training, but not really. So I have this business that I began in 2007 that is essentially the easiest way I explain to people. If I was sitting next to you on an airplane and we only had an hour and I was going to explain a little bit what I do and you would have no idea what I'm talking about, I would say CPR training,
Mhm.
because most people can recognize what CPR looks like. They've watched Grey's Anatomy, or they've actually taken a training class. Maybe their baby was born early and they had to take a training class before they left the hospital. Each person has a variety of ways they've learned. They might have learned as a Girl Scout or a Boy Scout, or they watched YouTube. But most people can recognize what CPR is. So by introducing the business as a CPR-based business, and the business is actually called Enos CPR Services, they have an idea of what I do, but there's so much different types of training that kind of moves off of CPR. Like, for instance, many people take first aid training classes and we combine it with CPR because CPR is the side of training where the victim is unconscious, because we do CPR on people who die. So they're never going to be awake, or they'll tell you to stop, right? First aid is more common. Everyone has life experience with first aid because at some point in your life, you've probably burned your fingers. You have felt dizzy in the heat. You have cut yourself before. You've touched a hot surface. You had a friend who had chest discomfort. You've vomited before. You've bumped your head before. You twisted your ankle before. These are all first aid emergencies. Well, some types of jobs require that you are formally trained with stuff you already know, but that you get a certificate proving you were trained, like a childcare provider or a teacher. You'd want to know the teacher had been trained, even though she already knew what to do if someone touched a hot surface. She needs to formally be in a classroom setting where someone can attest to it. So all the courses I offer have some type of certification, although you're not required to be certified if you, like I'm doing a class for a bunch of moms in a couple of weeks. Doesn't really have to cost anything. You know, a lot of industry you have to pay, but this is information that should be free. You know, I'm really into that. I can't always let it be free, because if you require certification, I have to pay entities. They live off of me, you know, OSHA, kind of think of that. American Heart Association, they all want money from each certification. But if you're doing it just to learn, and there's a lot of courses I offer that you can do just to get the information. So essentially what I do is present different aspects of safety, active shooter, removing someone from a space that's very small. Like think about what am I trying to say? My brain is not working today. Firefighters get you out of a car. They can't climb in because it's crushed. There's different types of training where you have to remove someone even if they're injured, and know that you have protection, what your job requires it. There's so many aspects. And I feel lucky that my business has grown, and I keep adding different types of courses, and people return to me, which makes me feel very special. And I love what I do. I love people. And I love that what I do for business is intangible. It is information. There's no part of what I do where I sell a product. The only thing I do is provide information to people. And that's basically it in a nutshell, I guess.
Beautiful. And when you talk about certification, those who get certified, does it add any value to them as career-wise, or what?
That's a great thing to ask. So certification is simply a diploma, a proof that you took a class. What I generally say in a group of people, like say that mom's group that I was talking about, they could have a card if they wanted it, but they really don't need to prove to anyone that they learned. But say one of them didn't know before I met them, because they're a teacher and it's summer break, they didn't really connect the dots that it would benefit them to be able to turn their card into their school, because the school may require proof that they were trained. So when we think of that class I'm speaking of for the moms, is actually because some of their children are going to babysit. Well, they should have a card, because if you were hiring a teenager to protect your children, you'd want to know they took some type of a training class. Well, initially, this moms group said they just need to learn. And I said, I'm going to tell you right now, they need to have a card, because the whole reason they're doing it is to help parents. Parents want to see that they were trained. And to do that, they need proof. And a card is that proof. Nurses need proof. Firefighters need proof. EMS needs proof. Police officers need proof, because their job requires it to keep on file. And that's really for liability protection and to satisfy requirements. And then there are people who just, I'm doing a class for a church, we're doing an active shooter training, because unfortunately they should know what to do if something was to happen. And that really doesn't have to cost any money. You know, it just depends on the industry, the requirement of the job. As soon as I get entities involved, or I provide certification. And so certification can make a big difference. Coaching, this is a time of year when coaches have to learn, because football season is coming and they need to have some type of card under the association that they're registered under. They need to have taken a training class. And so again, if in their regular job, they may not be required, but in the coaching position, they are. Depends.
And if you don't mind me asking, are you an authority to issue that certificate?
Yes, I am. Correct. Right. So certain licensed personnel that can teach courses under OSHA or American Heart or whatever have to have certain types of licenses. So for instance, one of my daughters, I have 4 daughters, 3 of them have actually been trained to train, but none of them are healthcare providers. So the most they can train is the basic level for healthcare providers. They can't go any higher than that for physicians or whoever, but they can do everything below that, which is childcare providers, babysitting, and they don't have to have any type of license to do that. But then I just had a class with anesthesiologists. You have to have a license to do that kind of training because of the liability that they carry. and then I carry that liability.
Mm-hmm.
So different types of work. But you would never want to take a class that didn't have a certification provided. If you were paying for a course, ultimately you would want to have some type of certificate or a card of some sort that you can take with you. A receipt is just showing you paid for something, unless you're paying for a course that doesn't have any certification. It's a learning course, say. And there are courses like that, of course, but
Very
yes.
nice. And can someone make a career out of it?
Oh, sure. I've made a career out of it. It can be difficult to do for what I do. I've had many people contact me about doing the same thing, but I say luckily in some aspects, like when COVID happened and we couldn't gather as groups, many people who did the basic type of training that I do for, let's say, healthcare providers, closed their businesses because all they did was one thing. And there was no crowd gathering allowed for a long time, maybe a year. And they couldn't survive financially keeping up with, if no one was gathering for classes, there was no course, right? You couldn't have a training class. Well, I have so many different aspects of training that I provide that I survived it. Because although classes weren't happening regularly, I had all types of courses through OSHA that didn't even require being in person with people. So my business could continue. And so during that stretch, many people couldn't hang on. And I actually have some of those people that work with me under my business because they still are a trained instructor and it takes quite a while to become one. And I wanted to give them the opportunity to continue or to help me with my business. And we're all independent contractors, which California actually doesn't even recognize, which is a shock because the federal government requires us to be independent. And so all of us, like I, as an independent provider, can work for my hospital as an instructor. I can work for a law enforcement agency as an instructor. I can work independently as an instructor. I have people that work under me that also do their own business. We're all independent contractors. In all senses of the word, we're independent. California, I like to say California is allergic to us, but they don't believe in independent contractors most of the time anymore, which is sad.
Understood. This is something new for me, that you are providing these kind of services and anybody can get trained on it, and then it is because people are dealing with lives, and if they know standardly what they're doing, they can be more sure of, and then those who are receiving, they can also be more sure of
Correct.
what being handled as. Thank you.
You're welcome. So when we think about someone, if I use you as the example, if you've never had formal training, sometimes there would be a reason you suddenly wanted to take training after not being a teenager. We're older, and sometimes I'll have the person first time and I'll say, all of your life, you've never had training. What made it happen now? Well, my father had a heart attack. And I felt like it was time for me to learn, even though they actually know most of everything I'm going to talk about. But it's interesting to hear someone say, you're right. That's really what I enjoy the most, is being able to tell people whatever you would have done yesterday is probably what you would have done today. Now that I've told you that what you're doing is correct. Some people do it because they're having a baby, or their grandbaby is being born, or they had a choking emergency, just a little bit, but everybody was fine. It made them feel worried and decided to take a class. It's different for each person.
And have you named different courses? How will one pick up which course to do, or it is a comprehensive course?
So if someone contacts me, as someone just did right before I got in the Zoom, most people will say, because most people don't realize there's different levels of training based on the jobs that people do. So when someone says, I need to take a CPR class, I'll say, great. What do you do for work? Or who said you needed to have training? If they say, oh, my school did, my daughter did, versus my coaching group said I had to, the state of California said I had to, that's going to give me a narrowing down of the type of course. And then if you're a healthcare provider or a dental provider versus a teacher or a coach, or someone who works in a high school group versus a preschool group, the age groups, then I can really narrow down. These are what people normally take. You're probably going to be required to take this. You'll probably need this, which I may not provide, but I can refer you to someone. There's so many types of industry, but I'm really good at narrowing it down because I don't like people taking a course and not realizing after they've already paid me that their job doesn't accept it. And then because OSHA doesn't care, I use OSHA generically, they're not always in these courses, but they're going to expect payment on the second class they take. They're not going to say, oh, you made a mistake, let's reduce the cost for them. So I try very hard to get them into the right class at the beginning so that they take just the one that they need to have, or the two that they need to have, and nothing more.
Understood. And so mostly it is online training or in class?
No, it's usually in person. Most trainings are in person. It's tangible. So you have, I just took all my products off my desk here, but tourniquets, and you touch them, you play with them, you put them on each other, EpiPen practice. There's all types of different training classes. And so the best types of trainings are done in person. There are a couple of courses out there that can be done online. Bloodborne pathogens, like people who get exposed to blood, like tattoo parlors, or people who are phlebotomists, like people who work around blood, may be required to take a training class on how to clean up blood if it's around them. But that can actually be done online. You don't really touch anything in class. It's just video driven, basically. And there's a card that's provided from that, but you don't have to come in person.
So now, yeah.
I was going to say there's one thing I can talk about to people that has to do with training that actually may benefit anyone who's watching this Zoom, in that when people take classes, everything that I'm talking about has essentially an underlying liability that most people worry about. What if I move someone? What if I don't have a card for the training I had, but I want to help my neighbor? Or what if I have a certification card, but I freeze when I see blood and I don't give help? Or what if I help, but the outcome becomes worse, like moving someone may hurt them? Or in a CPR emergency, they've already gone into cardiac arrest, which means their heart has stopped. There's really no way to hurt them any further. But you may feel that you're injuring them in the process of pushing really hard, and people will hesitate giving help because they don't want to be sued. The family can't, they'll lose their job, or they won't be able to coach anymore, or daycare licensing will punish them in some way. So this Zoom is being viewed only in California, or is it being viewed in other states?
All over the world.
Oh, all over the world. Okay, so I can speak to the US only, and on cruise ships and on airplanes. There is a law. In some other countries, they have the same law. Some countries don't have any law like this. It's called the Good Samaritan Law. In some places, it's called the Good Samaritan Act. And it is there to protect people who give help, but not for those who are paid to give the help. So as a nurse, I am not protected by a Good Samaritan law when I'm working, because I'm being paid to do the same skills I would have done off duty, but I'm choosing to help someone in a parking lot when I'm wearing a tank top and I don't have a team of people around me and I don't have equipment and I may have had a margarita. It's different than being at work with a team of people and equipment and medication and my knowledge with 10 other people. The expectation is different than a law enforcement officer on duty with a dispatcher in their ear versus them being on a beach with their wife on their honeymoon. So there's protection for people who may in the moment not give help in the same way they might have when they're with a team, or not have any formal training. Think about a first-time mom who is young and she never had a training class, she never needed to, but then this child is choking and she saw something on YouTube one time and she helps the child. When she worries she may have done it a little too hard, or she did a little too high on the belly and she's worried she hurt the child. Well, she did it voluntarily. She didn't make the child choke. She wasn't the reason for the problem. No one paid her for the help she gave, and she chose to do it freely because she wanted the outcome to be better. That is the aspect of the Good Samaritan law that protects everyone. In the US, or on an airplane, there's a version, or on a ship. There's an international version, because on a ship or on a plane, you only have the people on the plane. So you must protect someone who steps forward on a plane because there's only 300 people with you in the air. Someone who steps forward and wants to do CPR needs to be protected from liability because no one else is helping. And if they're giving of themselves to do something voluntarily, they didn't cause the person to die, they just reacted to the person becoming unresponsive. Why should they be blamed for an outcome when you don't even know why the person died? It could have been that they were bleeding inside and CPR is never going to help them.
Right.
But you try your best, they're unresponsive, not breathing. And so this law, which it's surprising how many people don't know that there is a law. They worry about liability. They've read something in a paper or they heard from a friend of a friend that someone got sued years ago. And that's just not the case anymore. As long as you don't accept money for payment, like if someone's child was choking and you said, give me $100 and I'll help your child. No one is going to do that. That's ridiculous. But if you accepted money after the fact, they said, you saved our child, we want to pay off your car or give you a Starbucks card, it opens you up to liability because you've been compensated. There's nothing against taking the payment. You can. But if they wanted to hold you liable, you would have to go through the courts. And even though you would win, you would have to get an attorney and take time off work. And so the protection is that if there's no compensation, which is why at the hospital, I'm not covered because I'm compensated. When I'm off duty, like I am right now in my office, if I saw something outside, I'd say to run out of the house and help UPS. I'm protected because I could have just stayed in my house and not said a word. Everyone who's listening has seen a car accident happen and not gotten out of their car at least one time. But you called 911 as you drove past, or you made sure people had stopped. It's a choice whether you stop to give help. In some places like Germany or in one province in Canada, you are required to stay at the scene of that accident as a citizen and give help. And if you leave the scene, you'll be arrested. Depends on where you live, you know, what country you're in and what the requirement is.
I feel that I'm being educated a lot of things, you know.
That's what I do. I educate people. I'm happy when someone learns something new because many people take classes every other year because they're required. And I always hope they get something a little new out of it, pick up a little something they didn't know. Otherwise, it's pretty boring for them.
So, do you have a website? Which
I do. I do have a website. Do I say the website? Or do you have it in writing that you're going to share after? Do you need me to tell
No,
you?
you say it. Say it now.
So my website is the name I mentioned. My middle name is Enos, which is a maiden name, ENOS, and then CPR, ENOS, CPR.com.
Very nice. Simple.
Yeah. And on there, you'll find a variety of courses, some information, and I am just one person of many, 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 many people across the country that provides training. There are a lot of people similar to me that are in Delaware or Texas or wherever, and you can find a provider in your local area. So, I mean, you can contact me and I can even give you the resources to look up someone closer to you if you live in Maryland or you're in Canada, let's say, or Mexico. But there's always someone around you that has probably got some training. It's whether they provide the certification that's required for your job. You want to make sure that whatever it is that you're getting as a course is recognized by your employer or your association that is requiring you to have the training.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yes. And another question is that do they have to, it is quite independent contractor, do they have to keep insurance and things like that?
Oh, yeah, lots of insurance. Yeah, lots of insurance. And I have to renew my certifications to provide the certifications. I have to renew them every 2 years, just like the regular certification timing for most courses. So if someone took a class today on June 4th, their card is going to expire on the last day of the month featured on the card in 2 years. So it will say recommended renewal date, June of 26. Well, if my instructor card was today, I would have to renew my instructor status for that one course. Keep in mind, I teach a dozen courses. Each one has to be renewed within a 2-year cycle, just like anyone else.
And how about CE units, if that is also applicable?
I do provide continuing education. Yeah. For certain types of entities, I can provide continuing education hours. Fire service, like EMS, or medical and dental, I'm a continuing education provider for different states, California primarily. But most CE providers, their certifications are accepted. Like, say again, someone from Delaware took a course from me, and I give them a California letter for continuing education. It's accepted by Delaware as long as it's an entity that's recognized within the US. So it doesn't matter where I travel, I can provide it, but it'll have whatever license I have. It's a Texas-based license. The letter will say Texas, or the letter will say Idaho, and it's accepted everywhere in the US.
Right. So another question, will you like to open more offices like yours, like franchise out or chapters, or, you know?
So that's a great question. So I am one entity, and I do have a training room in Tracy, California, but it's not a storefront business as far as someone just knocking any day of the week and there's a secretary in there. It's just a training room that we use whenever we have a class that we need to have pulled together. A lot of the trainings that I provide are on site at businesses. So they don't need to come to me. I'll go to a different state, or I'll go to a different city, San Francisco or wherever. And the employees are all on site at Bank of America. And I'll do the training at Bank of America for Bank of America. And Bank of America will pay for that on behalf of the employees. Employees will not pay for those courses. So I am just one entity, but I can travel. But there are people that I have that I am the planet, and I have some satellite people that are under me that can provide their own kinds of courses. That can do different aspects. Some only do 2 or 3 types of classes. Some only teach one type of class, but then I provide their cards for them. They just pay for the certifications. That way they can have their own independent business, but they can also work for me. We're all independent. And so I don't really need to have another kind of a spinoff of my business, because I can have little locations kind of all over the way I am.
I'll call them as chapters, maybe.
Yeah, and I don't really have a chapter, because a lot, I'd say the majority of what we do is on site. And I wouldn't even need to have a training room. When I was talking to Nancy about how I used to be at Workvine 209, which is a wonderful business that allows small businesses to have space to be able to provide if they need a meeting room, or like I needed a space for training classes because I didn't have one at the time. And now I have my own training room. I really would never need a training room. Really, I do most of my trainings at your business. So why would I need my own training room? I choose to have one because there are independent people that are one dental provider and one CNA and one nurse that all need the same class. I'll bring them together in my training room because their job may not provide the training. And so I have a storefront business, but it's really just for the space. I'm primarily independent. I'm invisible. I float around. I don't really have a home.
I will ask one last question, then over to Nancy.
Yeah.
My question is, if somebody will ask like how much they have to invest in courses and how much they can make if they do it full-time as a career.
That's harder to say. To start a business, let's say CPR training, it is hard to begin the business because, how do I put this into words? You would need to knock on a lot of doors. And the course is cyclical, meaning a card doesn't expire for 2 years. So if you walked into let's say a dental office and said, here's my information, they may have already taken a class 2 months ago. If they were going to reach out to you, they may not reach out to you for 20 months. So for a long time, you may not have any takers. Because if you're cold calling, walking in, which can be very difficult, some places, say it's a business, I already have the training contract with them, they're not going to switch providers. Or they may want to change providers. I've been with them for too long. You really just don't know. And so there's a lot of licensing that's involved, a lot of liability insurance is involved, and there's an equipment purchase that you need to make that's probably about $3,000 but you would own it forever. It's not $3,000 a month or something, I think when I first started out, my mom actually invested in me first, and it was $6,600 that I had to spend in order to get all the equipment that I needed and pay for my training courses and all that. And I always, anytime I haven't done an interview like this in a long time, but I always mention my mom, that she's and she's still around. My mom is the one who believed in me first and said, I think you can make this business grow, and I'm going to buy that equipment for you. And I've since then paid her back because I grew to the point where I felt like I wanted to give it back to her, you know. But without her, I wouldn't have started it at all, because it was a big investment at the time. But it is a fun business, and it's a business that makes me feel good. It has, as the owner of the corporation, I have a lot of paperwork, and it feels like I'm going to pull my hair out most days, which today, it being bouncy and curly from a hairdresser, it's probably balding in the back from all the hair pulling and all the gray color that I have that you can't see. There's a lot of requirements from different licensing agencies for paperwork for courses and, you know, business.
I can tell.
Yeah.
Because this is the most sensitive business to be in.
It can be. I think that if you're a medical provider, it's probably a more sensitive business, but training courses, it's just shocking how much complication there is in it. And yet my husband jokes that I hate the business side and I love talking to people. I love being around people. He calls it the fun side of the business, but I really don't want to do my QuickBooks, and I don't want to do invoicing, and I don't want to talk about insurance requirements, but I still have to do it and try to push it off as long as I possibly can, because I'd much rather talk to you about all the great things that citizens do to help each other. Yeah, because this is really about people stepping up and doing the right thing.
Right.
That's where my passion is. My passion is people and making someone feel empowered enough that in the moment that they see something, they feel like moving towards someone rather than hesitating, that they feel comfortable with their skills, comfortable understanding they can't be held liable unless they're the reason for the problem, of course. They ran them over and then gave help, they're still liable. But if you witness someone choking or you witness someone falling and you ran over there instinctually and tried to help them up, you're probably 99% correct with what you're doing. But in the back of your mind, you're always going to wonder when it's over if you should have done something else, and if they are going to know who you are and they're going to come after you. And that's why it's important to start every class with the conversation about liability. Yeah. Because unfortunately, especially in California, you really have to talk about it. Someone doesn't survive, a family wants to blame the rescuer. It's very common. And unfortunately, they're grieving. They don't understand that I found him in the bathroom. I didn't make him have this problem, but I was the one who found him. So I'm the likely person that someone's going to look at and say, did you do something incorrect? Did you push too hard? And that's why it's important that people know that there's a law that protects them if they decide to do the right thing. And they can't be held liable, even if they thought moving him from the bathroom was the most important thing. If that's the choice you make in the moment and you believe it was necessary, you can't be questioned later like, well, these people said they wouldn't have moved him. Well, you weren't there. I was alone. I had to make a choice in the moment, and I chose to get involved, and I felt like the building was going to collapse, and I dragged him to safety. In the process of moving him, I caused him a little bit of harm, but my intention was to get him help.
I had learned from a situation, an elderly had fallen, and she said, can you give me a hand to get up? No. You don't know if they're injured. Let the paramedics pick them up.
That's right. And so you probably said, why don't you stay where you are and I'll stay with you?
Yeah.
Is that help? That's a great thing I bring up in classes. Is just staying with someone help?
Yes.
Absolutely it is. If my grandmother was an hour ago sitting on a sidewalk or laying down in a grocery store and you were the only person who stayed with her, even though you didn't lay a hand on her, you simply took your jacket off and covered her and got help. Is that help?
Yes, I will.
Is it help?
It is.
That's 100%.
Yes.
But many people, that help is only defined as putting hands on another person.
Right. I will share one personal experience. We got involved in a fire accident. Our house got caught in fire big time.
Oh my gosh.
And the police officer who saved us, he told a story after the fact, when we were recovered. He said, I violated all the instructions given to me as per the situation. But he said, our chief has told us when human life is in question,
on the line, do whatever it takes.
Yes.
Correct.
So I'm so thankful to this common sense and wisdom. And today I just heard from you that there is a law which protects people go ahead and do your best.
Yes, because remember, the outcome is based on someone else,
Right.
potentially, except if you're alone, of course. But say you're with a 9-year-old child, they probably know how to call 911.
Right.
They may even know how to go next door to a neighbor that's a safe neighbor on the same side of the street to get an adult to come and help you. They don't even realize the help they're doing. We have people who you can recognize. Most people know how to recognize a stroke in most people. You see the face, facial changes, right? The fast scale face, arm, speech, timing, right? But sometimes people look at someone and they don't really know what's wrong, but they know that something is wrong. They can't put their finger on it, but maybe they're speaking too slowly, and yet they get help. They didn't even realize how huge it was because the victim cannot call for help in a stroke. They don't have the ability. They don't have the ability to speak. They rely completely on potentially a stranger telling another person how important does that person become to them. They become the most important person in their world.
Exactly.
And the family who's not there, here's this stranger who stayed with their mother. Shame on them if they decide to try to sue the rescuer who stayed with them, when all they did was come upon them at a grocery store and recognize that something was wrong and get some of at the store to help. You shouldn't blame people like that who are just doing the right thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Exceptions
Yeah,
are
there was
always
a
there, but most of the time people are thankful to the people, those who have helped.
I'd say most, let's call it 100% scale. I'd say 70% of people are grateful and 30% are disbelieving still.
Right.
Nothing against them. They're in shock or they're
Right.
overwhelmed with grief. It can be hard to step back from that level of adrenaline and really see the picture as it is and be able to recognize their grandmother would have been alone if this pregnant mother hadn't stayed here with her toddler in her lap, and to recognize the contribution she made. But there are many people who immediately will go to the person and say, thank you a million. Thank you for calling us. Thank you for staying with her. There are many people who will.
Right.
And then they'll leave and never tell anyone their name and don't want any recognition of any kind. And then there's other people who the newspaper wants to interview them because it was, the mayor of San Francisco died at a Safeway store, which is the truth. And the bystanders there, that he did not survive, unfortunately, but people in the store in the middle of the night didn't even recognize who he was, but gave him help. It didn't have a positive outcome, but the people that were helping, should they have been sued? They should not have been held liable. They just happened to be shopping in the same aisle as him when he collapsed. We need people to be willing to participate without fear that it might be interpreted that they're doing something incorrectly when no one else was there. We want people to make choices for themselves, and it helps if you have some kind of training, but the training is likely going to tell you that you already knew what to do, but maybe you never practiced putting on a tourniquet or using an EpiPen so in class we teach you.
Right. I've seen, most of the time, I would say 70% of the time, people's higher power takes over, those who are in a position to help, like some angelic influence, and they make quite a good estimation of the situation and do the right thing,
Yes.
More.
And they do that with training. They have a lot of training, but I'll tell you what, when EMS arrives at the scene, we call it the links in the chain. So the first link in the chain is recognition. So remember when I said the person's having a stroke? I found the person and recognized that there was some kind of an issue. I may not even know it's a stroke, but I then do the next link, which is getting help, which could be telling someone at Target to call for help or bringing them over or getting on a phone and calling 911. All these links. Well, one of the links is EMS providers arriving. Well, if they don't arrive for 15 minutes, what happened in the first 15 minutes? How important are the first links?
Exactly.
The first link is unlikely to be a professional unless you drop in front of an EMS team on lunch. You're probably going to be in a school, or you're going to be at a nightclub, or you're going to be at a bank. And the first people that help you are the employees or the security guard or the person standing in line behind you. And that first link is the most important link, because if you were alone, no one would have ever found you. There needs to be a person who activates EMS or helps you to your feet or applies pressure to a wound or something. It takes a person to do that. And largely it is not a professional. It's a bystander.
Right.
who's
I
not
was in
not required to give help.
Right.
I was in a situation. There was a car accident around the corner of a home that I was visiting, and the driver actually slammed his brakes and rammed into the side of a house. Immediately, I went outside, and he was trying to get out, and I saw his foot was dangling, his ankle.
Oh,
So it was. I'm sure the bone was completely snapped, but it was just the
wow.
tissue holding.
And he
He
was
was
in
getting ready
shock.
to
He didn't
stand
even
up. I
realize
said,
it.
"Stay in your seat." And he was saying, "Oh, I'm in so much pain." So what was I going to do? So until EMS came, I did a little bit of psychology, I guess. I don't know, like imagine you're in this nature field or something like that to get his mind off of it as much as possible.
How amazing that you did
Yeah.
that.
I
What
probably saved him from nerve damage on the foot.
you could have, what if you couldn't have stopped him and he got out of the car anyway?
I wouldn't let him.
What if the car was smoking and there was a feeling of urgency?
So there, you drag. So if there's a fire, and if you don't know if they have the back injury, I learned that you put the arms like this and you drag them. The back stays straight. But if they're in a seat, that's a little bit more tricky. I wouldn't know.
It is. And you see how with training, she had some training and
Mm.
she remembers that training, right? But then you have them in a vehicle strapped in or something, and you realize in the moment your brain does that calculation of how can I, and you say to someone, little old lady, okay, ma'am, this is going to hurt, but look behind you. If I don't move you, this is going to worsen. And that's where the law really steps in, because her hip is broken and she is going to scream. And you may worsen her a little bit, but what if you left her?
She wouldn't
That's
live.
law steps in, and the family goes, you should have left her. Okay, great to see now because the car didn't explode. But what if it had? No one was there. You were there. You felt it was important. Many people are very passionate when children are involved. And now their training goes to the wayside because they see a child in that car and they want to move, and yet they're not going to be held liable if they're doing what they believe is right. They're not intending to cause harm with. That's how the law is written. The intention is not to harm the person. It is to help the person. But in the process of helping, it causes a little harm.
So I told him his leg is broken, but I didn't say it's dangling because I didn't want him to panic. But I did say, if you get up, you're going to make it worse. Good enough, right?
Well, and if he got up, he probably would have fallen over because he couldn't bear weight on one side.
Right.
He may not have noticed that until he stood up. The body is an incredible thing. And he had so much adrenaline going through him. He may not even have felt the extreme level of that pain yet. He knew he had pain, but unless he was screaming his head off, it's probably protecting him a little bit until he got
Well, he was almost screaming. Have you ever had an incident during training? Was there ever an incident, did you have an incident during training that someone there literally needed CPR?
I work in an emergency room. So
No, during your training. Like if one of the students might have had her.
Yes, I will say several times, actually. I had a class, it was at Workvine, actually, where you picked up my business card. It was a pediatric first aid training class. It was a variety of different kinds of providers. It was a big class. It was coaches, gymnastic coaches, daycare providers, foster parents, all in this classroom. And one of the people in the class is a good friend of mine. She owns a gymnastics studio, or one of my daughters actually was on the team there. And her coaches were kind of sitting next to her. They were all in their late teens, early 20s. We're all sitting in the back row. And I was playing the video and talking. And I forget what she did. She either slumped forward, or Jenny, the friend of mine who owns the business, stood up and kind of pushed her back. And I said to everyone, why don't we take a break? And when I went back, she was having a seizure in the class. But there are different types of seizures, and some people kind of stay completely still, but they quiver. We call it a petite seizure versus the one everyone's familiar with, where the body thrashes and they can really injure themselves. She stayed perfectly still. She was quivering a little bit. And then we learned later that she was diabetic. And it was that her blood sugar was really, really low, and it caused these tremors for her. But it happened in the middle of a class. And so we actually used it as an example later in the class when we talked about blood sugar, we talked about seizures, and how she did not fit the mold of a seizure because she didn't fall over or hit her head over and over on the table. She just kind of became glassy-eyed.
She didn't lose conscious either, did she?
No, and with the seizure, keep in mind seizures can be caused by a lot of different things. Most common thing is epilepsy, but it can be caused by low blood sugar, head injury, anything with the head, overdose, poisoning tumors can cause it, shock can cause it. There's different layers. So if I fell from a roof 3 stories and I landed on my head, there's a pretty good chance I'm going to have a seizure. But that seizure is not from epilepsy. It's actually a symptom of me probably dying because I had a major head injury, right? So there are different presentations based on people, and yet seizures are generally treated the same way, just like you think they would. Don't move the person unless it's absolutely necessary. So like I'd fallen from a roof, I'm going to be violently shaking anyway. If I had fluids in my mouth and you thought I would aspirate, you may need to turn me. And the law is going to protect that. It's part of the training. If you need to turn the person on their side, try to do it as a rollover evenly, right? Not just twist their neck, but in a safe way as you can. But imagine being a bystander deciding to do that. That's why there's a law that protects people who maybe haven't had training in years and suddenly they are the only person there, and the person's survival is dependent on an average person or a friend that, or a child that doesn't know exactly what to do. 911 is a resource that everyone should use. If you're ever unsure of what to do, call 911 in your area. Dispatchers are wonderful and very underappreciated. They will use their voice, which sounds very tense at times, to try to snap you out of it and get you to follow their instructions. 911, we always want you to call 911 if you're ever unsure of what to do, ever unsure of what to do.
How long do you have to wait before you accept anything from the person that you saved their life? Let's say they went to the hospital, they got treated, they're well, and then a month later, you still can't accept because they could sue you, right?
No, you can accept anything that someone gives you. And 90% of the time, it's
to avoid the liability.
It's not going to affect you. It's that one time that there's a crazy person out there that decides their child got a cold 6 months later and says it must have been connected to the CPR that somebody did. Well, then they file it in a court of law and the court says, did they accept compensation? They say, well, I gave them a $500 gift certificate to Panera or something like that. Then it's considered compensation and they go through the court process just like normal. Doesn't mean they're going to lose. It means they're going to have to go to court. And so you can take anything from anyone that wants to give it to you. I joke that it should be a Starbucks card or something nominal, or they should write about you in the paper, or the job will give you a plaque, but you really can. There's no law preventing you from accepting.
It makes you liable. So how long do you have to wait before that won't work?
It does not make you liable. It opens you to liability because you become a paid participant after the fact. What they don't want people to do is withhold help until someone agrees to pay them. That is very different. Like, I'll move them, but it's going to cost you because I have a bad back and I don't want to get hurt. So I'm going to move this child, but you're going to owe me. I've never seen a case yet like that, but there would be, I'm sure there are people out there that have done that. So the law says you can't, if the best way to explain it, like I did before, is to say, I'm being compensated when I help you because I'm on the clock and I'm being paid in the moment. And I'm required to do it different. I can't be protected from liability because I'm expected to do it. My employer provides that liability. That's what I was going to say, a police officer. The county or the city that they work for is who absorbs that liability for them. They're not protected under the Good Samaritan law because they're expected to give help. Right. Different than the bagger at a grocery store who decides to follow you out shopping cart out, walking you out to your car, and they see something happen in the parking lot. Completely, I guarantee you, Safeway is not expecting that citizen employee to jump into action for this child who's going to dart into the parking lot, and they stop the child from running and pick him up so that he won't get hit by a semi truck coming down the road. These are choices people make in the moment that make differences in people's lives.
Very nice and totally a new but very relevant subject. Why I said new, because people are mostly unconscious to this fact that, you are just bringing that to the
They can be unconscious.
Yeah.
Right. So let's talk about that. At the beginning of training, people usually say, well, what if they wouldn't have wanted my help? Well, consent is a big deal. If I'm awake, I have a right to decline help. It'd be crazy for me to decline help. But let's say I was afraid I was pregnant and I had already lost 3 babies, and I'm afraid if you touch me, I might lose this baby. It's understandable that I might decline help, but I might need someone to explain to me again, to look behind me and see the fire, to say, we need to move. I'm trying to help you. And then I would change my mind. But what if I never change my mind? What if I decline help and eventually I become unconscious? Then what does the answer to the question become?
You help them.
You can help. That's why in CPR, hey, are you okay? If there's no response from the person, we assume they want to live. Most people in a public place did not go there to die. They were shopping at a store or they were at a friend's party, and they would want to live. She's pregnant. She wants to live. We assume people want to survive. Very few circumstances that we would assume the person doesn't want to survive. And so there are cases where someone is awake and you can give help even if they say no. And those people, generally speaking, are ones who don't understand you. They're autistic, they're drunk, they hit their head very hard and are confused, or they're in shock.
Or they're suicidal.
They're suicidal, they don't speak the language. There are many instances where someone, you can tell by looking at them, they really, someone has dementia. They can never answer you. They genuinely have no idea what you're talking about. You can give help to those people and you can't be held liable because they didn't say yes. Sometimes consent is passive, because remember when I was pregnant and I just said I was saying no, but now that I look and I see the fire, I simply start moving with you. That is consent. I'm not saying, okay, then yes. You don't need to hear the word yes. You need to see that the person is willing to go. Or they hand you their broken arm knowing that you're going to splint them, but it might hurt, that's consent. Consent is important. Obviously, if someone is saying no, they don't say, too bad, I just took a class, you're going to help me, I'm going to help you. People have a right to decline help as long as they are in the right mind. Under the age of 18, they can't give consent.
Thank you for all your time, and I'm sure we will take tips out of this talk, and then we will
Absolutely.
so that people
Well,
can.
yeah, and like if your group wanted to learn, I would totally donate that for you. So you had a group of people together, yeah, because it's a good thing to do, right? And for good people, and this is a women's symposium that you offer here, it would make sense. It doesn't have to be about money. Sometimes it is about money.
Right.
But it's wonderful when it's not, because it's just information. It makes people feel good. It makes people feel nervous, but it makes people feel good. They're, learning, or it reinforces what they already know.
Definitely. Thank you. And we will pass it on. And I'm sure 100%, I kind of had few people in mind, those who would like to do this kind of training. Yeah. And with that will be add on to what they already know.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you can send me a message and I'll work it out. And we'll get together. It'll be fun to see everyone in person.
Sure.
And the training is not very long. It's a couple hours. It's not like all day long and there are no exams.
They give you the answers, like when I did training with the American Heart Foundation, they give you the answers for every question.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm American Heart. And so in American Heart, certain types of courses, we can opt to give exams or not. And so I opt to not, because many people are afraid to take tests because they think they're poor test takers. And then all they worry about is what I say. I just want them to relax and listen. I don't want them to worry about an exam. Yes. So anyway, thank you for having me. It was nice to meet you. And hopefully, even if a little thing that I said today helps someone, it makes me feel really good. Really good.
I'm the first person whom you helped.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
and thanks for having me. I think this is really fun. I haven't done something like this in a long time. So thank you. And thank you, Nancy, for inviting me.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Nancy. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much.